The Mississippi River doesn't give up its dead easily. It holds them in its cold, brown embrace. It tumbles them over snags and forgotten debris. It wraps them in silt and secrets until they are no longer recognizable as human. But sometimes, just sometimes, it gets tired of the weight, and it lets go. November 9th, 2018. The air in Havenwood, Louisiana was thick enough to drink. A humid, soupy fog clung to the cypress trees, their branches dripping a slow, steady rhythm onto the murky water below. The sun was a pale, disinterested smear in the sky, offering no warmth, only a hazy, oppressive light. It was the kind of morning that felt heavy with unspoken things. Old Man Bo felt it in his bones. He'd been fishing this stretch of the river his whole life. He knew its moods, its dark currents, its silences. He sat in his small, rusted john boat, the line from his cheap fiberglass rod limp in the water. The only sounds were the lazy buzz of a horsefly and the gentle lapping of the river against the hull. He was about to call it a day. The catfish weren't biting. The air felt wrong. He started to reel in his line, his movements slow and practiced. That's when he saw it. About 20 yards out, a pale shape bobbing in the water. At first he thought it was a log or a bloated deer that had tried to cross the river and failed. But it wasn't shaped like a log. It had a strange, almost graceful quality to its movement as the current nudged it along. Bo squinted, his old eyes straining against the glare. The shape turned slightly. He saw something that looked like fabric. Something that looked like hair, fanned out like a dark halo in the water. A cold dread, colder than the river itself, seeped into his chest. He'd seen it before, twice in his 73 years. You never forget the sight. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his cheap flip phone. He dialed 911. His voice was a dry, raspy whisper. "Y'all need to get down to the old landing near Havenwood," he croaked. "The river's coughed something up. Something bad." The wail of sirens cut through the morning's thick silence not long after. Two sheriff's department cruisers crunched down the gravel path to the landing. Detective Miles Corbin stepped out of the lead car. He was a man out of place. His suit, though practical and dark, looked too formal, too rigid for the wild, untamed Louisiana landscape. He'd been in Havenwood for 3 years, a self-imposed exile from the concrete chaos of New Orleans. But he still hadn't gotten used to the humidity. It clung to him, a constant, unwelcome companion. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves, the snap echoing in the quiet air. The department's small motorboat was already in the water, 2 deputies carefully maneuvering a body bag onto a gurney. The air was suddenly thick with a new smell, not just mud and river water. It was the smell of decay, sweet and cloying, and utterly final. Corbin walked over to the gurney as they secured it on the bank. "What have we got, Jimmy?" Deputy Jimmy Thibodeau, a young man with a perpetually worried expression, shook his head, avoiding looking directly at the bag. "It's bad, Miles. Real bad. Female. Been in the water a while." Corbin nodded. He braced himself and pulled down the zipper. The smell intensified, a physical assault. The victim was female, as Jimmy had said, but that was the only simple fact. Her body was a waterlogged ruin. Her skin was a pale, marbled gray, sloughing off in places. But it was the other details that made Corbin's stomach tighten. Her hands and feet were bound tightly with thick, industrial-grade zip ties, the kind electricians used. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a suicide. This was a disposal. Her head was a horror show. Her hair was matted with mud and riverweed, but beneath it, her face was a canvas of brutal injuries. It was hard to even tell where her features should have been. It looked like someone had taken a hammer to her. Her arms were covered in dark, ugly bruises, the kind that spoke of a struggle, of someone trying to defend themselves. "Any ID?" Corbin asked, his voice low and steady, a practiced calm he didn't feel. "Nothing. Pockets are empty. No purse, no wallet, nothing nearby." Corbin's eyes scanned the body. Despite the horrific state of decay and the violence inflicted upon her, a few things stood out. Her hands, though swollen, were soft. No calluses, no rough skin. She didn't work with her hands. Her clothes, what was left of them, were fashionable, a brand of jeans he recognized from the city. Around her neck, glinting against the pale, ruined skin, was a small, delicate gold chain. A jade Buddha pendant hung from it. Gold earrings were still in her lobes. Valuables. The killer hadn't taken them, so this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. This was rage. He looked at her face again, or what was left of it. The damage was too precise, too thorough. It wasn't just the result of a beating. It was deliberate obliteration. The killer didn't just want her dead. They wanted her erased. They wanted to make sure no one would ever know who she was. "All right," Corbin said, zipping the bag back up. "Get her to Anya. I want a full workup. Tell her to take her time. I want every damn detail, every fiber, every scratch. I want to know what she ate for her last meal. I want to know if the water in her lungs is from this river or somewhere else." He turned and looked out at the Mississippi. It flowed on, indifferent, a vast, moving graveyard that kept its secrets well. But this time, it had given one back. And it was Corbin's job to make it talk. The drive to the parish morgue was quiet. Corbin's mind was a whirlwind of images, the bound hands, the ruined face, the glint of gold. This wasn't a crime of passion, a sudden explosion of violence. This was methodical, the zip ties, the deliberate disfigurement. The killer had time. They had a plan. They thought throwing her in the river would be the end of it, a final muddy period at the end of a violent sentence, but they were wrong. This was just the beginning. Dr. Anya Sharma's lab was a stark contrast to the world outside. It was cold, sterile, and bathed in the unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights. It was a world of stainless steel and scientific certainty. Anya herself was a small, precise woman with dark, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She was one of the best forensic pathologists in the state, and Corbin had been grateful she worked out of this quiet parish ever since he'd arrived. "She's a mess, Miles," Anya said, not looking up from her initial examination. The victim's body lay on the steel table, a pale, tragic landscape under the bright lights. "The water's done a number on her, but the water isn't what killed her, not by a long shot." Corbin stood by the door, a silent observer. He respected Anya's process. He knew better than to rush her. "See here," she said, pointing with a steel probe to the victim's chest. "No significant water in the bronchi. Stomach isn't distended. Lungs aren't filled with diatoms from the river. She was dead before she ever hit the water. This was a dump job, plain and simple." She moved the probe to the victim's hands. "The decomposition is advanced, but it's not uniform. See the fingertips? The tissue still has some elasticity, same with the soles of her feet. Based on the water temperature this time of year and the state of the internal organs, I'd put her in the water for about 7 days, give or take." 7 days, a lifetime in a murder investigation. "Cause of death?" Corbin asked. Anya sighed. It was a weary, familiar sound. "Where do you want to start? She's got blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a heavy, hard object, multiple impacts, enough to render her unconscious probably, but that's not what killed her." She pointed the probe again, this time to a series of smaller, almost hidden wounds on the victim's torso. "These are the kill shots, stab wounds, small sharp object, a knife, maybe a stiletto type. Deep, precise. He knew what he was doing. He hit the heart, the lungs. He wanted to make sure she was gone." She then gestured to the victim's face. "And then there's this. This is something else. This happened after she was dead." Anya's voice dropped, taking on a tone of clinical disgust. "These are sharp force injuries, slashes, dozens of them, they're layered. He wasn't just trying to hurt her, he was trying to erase her. He took his time. This is pure, unadulterated rage, hatred. He wanted to make it so her own mother wouldn't recognize her." Corbin felt a cold knot form in his stomach. A crime committed in an enclosed space, a long, torturous ordeal, a violent death, and then a cold, calculated effort to destroy her identity before dumping her like trash. This wasn't about a relationship gone sour. This was about possession, about annihilation. "Anything else?" he asked. "A few things," Anya said, her focus unwavering. "Female. Age, I'd guess 40 to 50. It's hard to be precise with the state of the tissue. Height, she's short, maybe 4'10", 4'11" at the most. We'll get a more accurate measurement later." She paused. "And one more thing. I was able to get some partial prints from her fingertips. The cold water actually helped preserve them, believe it or not. I've sent them off to the state database and AFIS. It's a long shot, but it's the best shot we have. Without a face, these fingerprints are our only hope of giving her back her name. Corbin nodded. A name. Everything started with a name. Without it, she was just Jane Doe, another statistic, another ghost haunting the banks of the Mississippi. He looked at the ruined body on the table. Someone out there knew her. Someone loved her. Someone hated her enough to do this. He had to find them for her. He spent the rest of the day chasing ghosts. He put out a bulletin to all surrounding parishes, missing persons reports, female 40, 50, short stature. He got a dozen hits. He spent hours on the phone talking to worried husbands and concerned children. Each call ended the same way. Their loved one had been found. A misunderstanding, a fight. They were safe. Each call was a small relief, but also a deeper frustration. His Jane Doe was still nameless. The next morning his phone rang. It was Anya. Her voice was different. Not the tired clinical tone of the morgue. It was sharp, excited. "We got a hit, Miles." Corbin sat bolt upright in his chair. "You're kidding me." "AFIS just kicked it back. The Prince match. We have a name. Her name is Jolene. Jolene Dubois. Jolene Dubois." The name felt solid, real, a person, not just a body. "Where's she from?" Corbin asked, already grabbing a pen. "Right here," Anya said. "Her last known address is in Stone Creek over in Jiangjin Parish, not far from where she was found." There was a pause. "And Miles, there's more. The hit didn't just come from the DMV database. It came from our own." "Our own?" "Yeah, Chongqing City Public Security's criminal list, or as we call it, the parish sheriff's list of troublemakers. She has a prior. Disturbing the peace, assault, from about 5 years ago." Corbin felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the first real thread. Jolene Dubois wasn't just a victim. She was a woman with a history of conflict. And in a town like Havenwood, a history like that never really goes away, it just waits, like a body in the river. The old case file on Jolene Dubois was thin, its manila folder yellowed and soft at the edges. Corbin read it in his cramped, dusty office, the ceiling fan stirring the humid air without offering any real relief. The story it told was small-town drama at its ugliest. 5 years ago, an elderly man in Stone Creek, a widower with a bit of property, had taken a liking to Jolene. He'd let her live in a small cottage on his land for free. The town, being a town, started to talk. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to accusations. People said she was taking advantage of him, that she was a gold digger, a whore. One afternoon, in the checkout line at the Piggly Wiggly, a couple of local women had said something to her face. Jolene, according to the report, did not take it well. Words were exchanged, then shoves. By the end of it, Jolene had broken one woman's nose and given the other a black eye. She was arrested, charged with assault and disturbing the peace. The charges were later dropped when the women declined to testify, but the story stuck. Jolene Dubois had a temper. She wasn't someone you crossed. Corbin closed the file. It painted a picture of a woman who was proud, a fighter. But it didn't tell him who would want to tie her up and beat her to death. He needed to talk to her family. The address on file led him to a dilapidated house on the outskirts of Stone Creek. It was a place that seemed to be slowly surrendering to the relentless Louisiana humidity. Paint peeled from the siding like sunburnt skin. The yard was a tangle of overgrown weeds. A rusty chain-link fence sagged around the property. As Corbin pulled up, he saw a man sitting on the porch steps, smoking a cigarette. He was wiry and thin, with the same dark hair described in Jolene's file. He looked up as Corbin's car approached. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. This had to be the brother mentioned in the report, Lac Trong, or as they called him here, Jesse Dubois. "Jesse Dubois?" Corbin asked, getting out of the car. The man grunted, not standing up. "Who's asking?" "Detective Miles Corbin, Jiangjin Parish Sheriff's Department. I need to talk to you about your sister, Jolene." Jesse's expression didn't change. He took a long drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling from his lips. "What about her?" he asked, his voice flat. "When was the last time you saw her, Jesse?" Jesse stared out at the road for a long moment. "Week ago, maybe 10 days. I don't keep a damn calendar." 10 days. Corbin's gut tightened. Jolene's body had been in the water for about a week. Her own brother hadn't seen her in 10 days, and he hadn't thought to report her missing. "You haven't heard from her? She hasn't called?" Jesse scoffed. Jolene does what Jolene wants. She comes and goes. Ain't my business to keep tabs on her. He flicked his cigarette butt into the weeds. Why are you asking all this? She in some kind of trouble again? Corbin leaned against the hood of his car. There was no easy way to say it. Jesse, I'm afraid I have some bad news. We found a body in the river yesterday morning. We've identified her. It was Jolene. The reaction was not what Corbin expected. There was no gasp, no cry of disbelief. Jesse just sat there, his face a hard, unreadable mask. He stared at Corbin for a few seconds, then looked down at his own worn-out boots. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Dead? He said, the word coming out quiet. I'm very sorry for your loss, Corbin said, watching him carefully. We believe she was murdered. Jesse finally looked up. His eyes were cold. Can't say I'm surprised. The way she lived her life, the people she ran with. What people are those, Jesse? I don't know their names. Scum, all of them. He stood up, his movements stiff. Look, detective, me and Jolene, we didn't get along. She had a mean streak, a bad temper. We fought. A lot. Corbin remembered something from the old file. He'd pulled the full jacket, not just the summary. There were other reports, not just Jolene's assault charge. There were multiple calls to this very house, domestic disturbances. And they weren't all Jolene's fault. Several times, Jesse himself had been the one accused of starting the physical fights. The reports say you two came to blows more than once, Corbin said, his tone even. Jesse didn't flinch. I said we fought. Sometimes she started it. Sometimes I did. That's what family does sometimes. Doesn't mean I wanted her dead. He gestured vaguely at the run-down house. This place is right near the river. You think I'm stupid enough to kill my own sister and dump her a mile downstream? Come on. He seemed calm, too calm, but his logic was sound. It would be a foolish move. Is there anyone else in the house? Corbin asked. Just my mama, Jesse said, his voice softening for the first time. She's old, can't see, can't hear much either. She don't need to hear about this, not yet. Corbin asked to look around. Jesse shrugged and let him in. The inside of the house was even more depressing than the outside. It was dark and cluttered, thick with the smell of dust and something else, something vaguely medicinal. In a dim corner of the living room, an old woman sat in a rocking chair, her eyes milky and unfocused, her hands clutching a worn blanket. She didn't seem to notice them enter. Corbin walked through the small house. The kitchen was a mess of dirty dishes. Jesse's room was Spartan, a mattress on the floor, clothes piled in a corner. There was a small shed-like room out back. Jesse said it was where Jolene stayed when she came to visit their mother. It was filthy. A thin, stained mattress lay on a cot. The air was stale and infested with silverfish. The state of the room spoke volumes about the strained relationship. This wasn't a guest room. It was a place you put someone you were tolerating. Corbin found nothing, no signs of a struggle, no cleaning supplies that looked out of place, no hidden weapons. He went back outside where Jesse was lighting another cigarette. You have any idea who she might have been seeing? A boyfriend? Anyone who might have a grudge? Jesse hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Corbin to notice. She had some fella, he said finally. Don't know his name. Some slick talker from out of state. Texas, I think. Drove a loud motorcycle. I met him once. Didn't like him. Why not? He came here with Jolene to see Mama. He looked at her, at my mother, like she was a piece of dirt. Old and useless. I told him if he ever looked at her like that again, I'd break his damn jaw. We got into it. Jolene had to pull us apart. Jesse shook his head. After that, I deleted his number from my phone. Didn't want nothing to do with him. A boyfriend. An out-of-towner. This was a solid lead. Did Jolene seem scared of him? Was their relationship good? How the hell should I know? Jesse snapped. I told you, we didn't talk much. All I know is he ain't called looking for her, just like I ain't. Makes you wonder, don't it? It did. It made Corbin wonder a lot. He checked Jesse's alibi for the time of the murder. Neighbors and the bartender at the local dive confirmed it. Jesse was a creature of habit. He was either at home looking after his mother or he was at the bar drinking cheap whiskey and losing money at the video poker machine. He wasn't a killer. He was just a sad, angry man trapped in a sad, angry life. As Corbin drove away, he crossed Jesse's name off the top of his suspect list. But the boyfriend, the slick talker from Texas, his name went right to the top. The boyfriend's name was Ricky Tui Truong. It took some digging. Jesse had deleted the number, but he remembered that Jolene had once used her niece's phone to call the man. A quick warrant and a chat with the niece gave them the number. It was registered to a Ricky Tran with an address in LaShawn, Texas, a small city a few hundred miles west. Corbin's team pulled Jolene's travel records. They found a bus ticket, mid-October, about 3 weeks before her murder, a one-way ticket from Havenwood, Louisiana to LaShawn, Texas. But there was no record of her ever coming back, at least not by bus or train. The thought sent a chill down Corbin's spine. What if she was killed in Texas? What if Ricky Tran drove her body all the way back here to dump it in the Mississippi, a place he knew she was from, to throw them off? It was a plausible theory, but Anya's forensic report threw a wrench in it. "No way, Miles," she'd said over the phone. "The river here is fast, but it's not that fast. Leshan is hundreds of miles away by water. If he dumped her there, it would have taken her weeks, maybe months, to float all the way to Havenwood, and the body would be in a much different state, skeletonized probably. No, she went into the water somewhere close, somewhere in this parish. So she had come back. But how? The answer came from the endless, boring eyes of traffic cameras. They pulled the footage from the main highway connecting Texas and Louisiana for the weeks leading up to the murder. It took hours of tedious work, but they found him. Ricky Tran on a big black Harley Davidson cruising east into Louisiana, and on the back of his bike, holding on tight, was Jolene Dubois. This was a few days after she had arrived in Texas. He was bringing her home, but the crucial piece of footage came from a gas station camera just outside Havenwood. It showed Ricky's motorcycle pulling in. Jolene got off. They appeared to be arguing. It wasn't a violent fight, just tense. She grabbed her small duffel bag from the back of the bike, slung it over her shoulder, and walked away, down the road toward town. Ricky watched her go, then filled up his tank, got back on his bike, and headed west, back toward Texas. The timestamp on the video was critical. It was October 28th, 5 days before Anya estimated Jolene was murdered. The team tracked Ricky's movements after that. His phone pinged off towers consistently in Texas. He never came back to Louisiana. On November 2nd, the day Jolene was most likely killed, Ricky Tran was at his construction job 2 states away. He had a rock-solid, ironclad alibi, another dead end. Corbin felt the frustration mounting. The case was a week old. The trail was getting colder by the hour. Jolene's world was a maze of dead ends and contradictions. She was a small-town woman with a temper, a mysterious, out-of-state boyfriend, and a family that didn't seem to miss her when she was gone. Nothing added up. He decided to go back to basics. Who did she see every day? Who were her friends? The file mentioned she was unemployed, so how did she live? Where did she spend her time? He started canvassing the shabby bars and diners in Havenwood, showing Jolene's photograph. It was the photo from her 5-year-old arrest. A defiant, angry-looking woman staring into the camera. Most people didn't recognize her. But then he got a hit. "Yeah, I know her," said a grizzled bartender named Earl, wiping down his counter with a dirty rag. "Jolene, she used to come in here, sat at that corner table by the jukebox, mostly kept to herself." "Who was she with?" Corbin asked. "Sometimes alone, sometimes with Brenda. Brenda lives in the apartment complex behind the laundromat. They were thick as thieves, those two." Earl leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Jolene was a strange one. Always had cash, but never had a job, you know what I mean? And she was always on the phone, arguing with someone. Brenda, Tan, a new name, a new thread. Corbin found her in a cramped second-floor apartment that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener. She was a thin, nervous woman with darting eyes. When she saw Jolene's picture, her face crumpled. "Oh, God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "I knew it. I knew something was wrong." She let Corbin in, and the story of Jolene Dubois finally began to take shape. Brenda said they were more than friends. They were roommates. Jolene had been staying with her for the past few months. "She was a good person, Detective," Brenda said, wringing her hands. "She just had a hard life. Men were always a problem for her." "Like the boyfriend, Ricky?" Corbin asked. Brenda shook her head. "Ricky was nothing, just a fling. He was nice to her, bought her things. But he wasn't the one. There was someone else, someone here in town." Corbin leaned forward. "Who?" "I don't know his name," Brenda said, her voice barely a whisper. "She never told me. It was a secret. She was scared of him, I think, but also she couldn't stay away. It was like he had some kind of hold on her. Brenda explained that Jolene had a second phone, a cheap burner phone. She used it only to talk to this one man. Sometimes, Brenda said, she'd use my phone to call him. I don't know why. Maybe she thought it was safer. I'd hear her talking. Her voice would be different, so small, so obedient. It was always, "Yes, sir. Okay, sir. I understand, sir." Never anything else. It creeped me out. This was it, the missing piece, the secret life. "Brenda," Corbin said, his voice gentle but firm. "When was the last time you saw Jolene?" Brenda's eyes filled with tears. "November 2nd, that morning. She got a call, on the burner phone. She looked pale after. She just said, 'I have to go to Baisha. I'll be back tonight.' Then she left. And she never came back." Baisha Town, a small, forgotten hamlet on the other side of the parish, a place known for its illegal fishing operations and the kind of people who didn't want to be found. Did she say who she was meeting? No, she never did. Brenda hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Detective, there's something else. The way she paid her rent, it was always cash, and sometimes she'd have men come over when I was out at work. She told me they were just friends. But I knew she was seeing them for money." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The soft hands, the fashionable clothes, the lack of a job, the secrets. Jolene Dubois was a prostitute, and the man she called Sir wasn't just a controlling boyfriend. He was either her pimp or a very dangerous client. "Brenda," Corbin said, his heart pounding, "you said she used your phone sometimes. Do you think the number might still be in your call history?" Brenda nodded, her hands shaking as she pulled her phone from her pocket. She scrolled through the list of recent calls, her finger tracing the screen. Then she stopped. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "This one. She called it on November 1st, the day before she disappeared." Corbin looked at the number. He took a picture of it with his own phone. He felt a strange sense of familiarity, a faint bell ringing in the back of his mind, but he couldn't place it. He thanked Brenda and left. The pieces of the case finally starting to form a coherent, ugly picture. Jolene went to Baisha Town on November 2nd to meet the mysterious Sir, and she never came back. Back at the station, Corbin ran the number. The result came back almost instantly. The phone was a prepaid burner, but it had been registered. The name on the account was a Mr. Tu, and his address was in Baisha Town. It was all fitting together, too perfectly. "Let's go pay Mr. Tu a visit," Corbin said to his partner, a young, eager detective named Miller. The drive to Baisha was like driving back in time. The paved roads gave way to gravel, then to dirt. The houses were smaller, more isolated. It was a place where people kept to themselves and didn't welcome strangers, especially strangers with badges. They found the address, a small, unpainted shack set back from the road. An old woman answered the door, her eyes clouded with suspicion. "We're looking for Mr. Toe," Corbin said, holding up his badge. The woman just stared at him. Then she slowly stepped aside, revealing the dark interior of the house. The smell of sickness and poverty hit them like a wave. In a bed in the corner of the main room lay a man. He was skeletal, his body twisted into a permanent, painful-looking position. His eyes were open, but they were vacant. He was completely paralyzed, and from the looks of it, had been for a very long time. This was Mr. Toe, and he hadn't made a phone call or done anything else in years. "His ID card," the old woman said, her voice a dry rasp. "It was stolen a long time ago. Someone must have used it." Corbin stood there, the feeling of a lead turning to dust in his hands. Someone had used a disabled man's identity to register a burner phone. Someone smart. Someone careful. He walked back to the car, the frustration returning, sharp and bitter. He stared at the number on his phone again. To Lac Duong Hoa. Why did that name sound so familiar? He scrolled through his contacts, his case files, digging through the archives of his own memory. And then it hit him. It hit him like a physical blow. Lac Duong Hoa, Caleb Vance. He hadn't encountered the name in a murder case. It was from a completely different investigation. A few months back, they'd been cracking down on illegal catfish noodling rings in Baisha. There had been a man they'd questioned, a low-level guy on the fringes of the operation. He was slippery, a known liar, but they couldn't pin anything on him. His name was Caleb Vance, and when Corbin had taken his statement, he'd asked for his phone number to follow up. Corbin pulled up the old case file on his laptop. He found the number he'd written down. He compared it to the number from Brenda's phone. They were a perfect match. "I know who he is," Corbin said, his voice grim. "Let's go." Caleb Vance lived in a place that made Jesse Dubois's house look like a palace. It was a ramshackle building leaning precariously to one side, surrounded by a yard full of junked cars and rusted farming equipment. As Corbin and Miller pulled up, a strange sight greeted them. A man who looked to be Caleb's brother was in the yard, his movements jerky and repetitive. He was pushing an old, empty wheelbarrow back and forth, his head down, muttering to himself. He seemed to be reenacting something, lost in a world of his own. Corbin watched him, a cold feeling creeping up his spine. The empty wheelbarrow, the repetitive motion. It was like watching a ghost play out a memory of disposing of something heavy. They found Caleb Vance inside. He'd locked himself in his bedroom. The TV was blaring, a desperate attempt to drown out the world outside. When they kicked the door in, he didn't fight. He just stood there, his eyes wide with a terror that was almost animalistic. And before Corbin could even say a word, Caleb blurted it out, the words tumbling over each other in a panicked rush. "It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I don't know anything. I'm innocent." It was the confession of a guilty man. While Miller cuffed a frantic Caleb Vance, Corbin scanned the room. It was filthy, but one thing stood out. The small, attached kitchen area was spotless, impeccably clean. The floorboards looked like they had been scrubbed raw. It was the kind of clean that screamed that it was hiding something. Corbin got down on his hands and knees, shining his flashlight along the baseboards, and there, in the cracks between the wood, he saw them, faint dark brown stains. They were almost invisible to the naked eye, but they were there. It was enough. The interrogation room was small and cold. Caleb Vance sat hunched over the metal table, his initial panic having subsided into a trembling, sweaty fear. He'd spent the first hour sticking to his story. He didn't know any Jolene. He didn't know what they were talking about. He was innocent. Corbin let him talk. He let him lie until he was exhausted. Then he slid a photograph across the table. It was the crime scene photo of Jolene's face. The ruined, obliterated mess. Caleb flinched, turning his head away. "I can't look at that," he whispered. "You couldn't look at her then either, could you, Caleb?" Corbin said, his voice quiet and dangerous. "After you were done with her." He slid another photo across the table, a picture of the dark stains on Caleb's kitchen floor. "We found these. We're testing them for blood right now. We both know whose it's going to be." That's when Caleb broke. The dam of lies and fear burst, and a torrent of choked sobs and half-sentences poured out. "It wasn't me," he wept. "I swear to God it wasn't me who killed her. I couldn't." "Then start talking," Corbin said. "Start from the beginning. Who was Jolene to you?" The story that emerged was pathetic and sad. Caleb admitted he'd known Jolene for 2 years. He was her client. He was the man she called Sir. At first, it was a simple transaction, money for services. But over time, he said, something had changed. He'd started to have feelings for her. He saw her as more than just a prostitute. He claimed the affection was mutual, that she'd started seeing him without charging him. He saw himself as her protector, her confidant. "I tried to get her to stop," Caleb sobbed. "I told her it was too dangerous, that she was getting too old for the life. But she wouldn't listen. She said it was all she knew." He even claimed he'd tried to help her, referring other men to her when she needed the money, acting as a sort of informal pimp, taking no commission. He painted himself as a tragic, love-struck hero. Corbin didn't buy a word of it. "What happened on November 2nd, Caleb?" Caleb wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. "She was supposed to come see me, but I had to work, so I introduced her to someone else." "Who?" "My co-worker from the catfish farm, a guy I work with. His name is Tamak Kwong." Caleb looked up, his eyes pleading. "His name is Travis Cole." The name hit Corbin like a freight train. Travis Cole. He knew the name, a quiet guy, kept to himself. A hard worker according to the foreman at the farm, no criminal record. He was the last person anyone would suspect. I gave him her number, Caleb continued, his voice barely audible. He was looking for a good time. I told him Jolene was clean, that she was good people. He said he'd call her. That's all I know, I swear. I never saw her again after that. Corbin stood up. He looked at the sniveling, pathetic man in front of him. Caleb Vance wasn't the killer. He was too weak, too cowardly, but he was the architect of Jolene's death. He was the one who had opened the door and pushed her through it. "Stay with him," Corbin said to the officer at the door. He walked out of the interrogation room, his mind racing. He pulled out his phone and called Miller. "I've got a new name, Travis Cole. He works with Vance at the fish farm. I want you to take a team to his house. Now don't let him destroy anything. I'm on my way." The race to Travis Cole's house was a blur of flashing lights and screaming sirens. Corbin's mind was a storm. If Travis was the killer, he'd had over a week to clean up, to get rid of the evidence. They might be too late. Travis Cole lived in a small, neat-looking house at the end of a quiet suburban street. It was the picture of humble domesticity. A well-tended lawn, a clean-looking pickup truck in the driveway. It didn't look like the home of a monster. Miller's team was already there, blocking the driveway. They met Corbin on the lawn. "He's inside," Miller said. "He won't let us in without a warrant. Says he doesn't know any Jolene Dubois." Corbin walked to the front door. Travis Cole stood behind the screen, a man of average height and build, with a plain, forgettable face. He looked nervous, but he was trying to project an air of indignant innocence. "Mr. Cole," Corbin said, his voice calm, "we just want to ask you a few questions about a woman named Jolene Dubois." "I told your deputy," Travis said, his voice tight. "I don't know her. Never met her. You're harassing me." "It's funny," Corbin said, leaning in slightly, "because your co-worker, Caleb Vance, says he gave you her number just last week, says you were planning on meeting up with her." Travis's composure started to crack. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "Caleb's a liar. He's always making stuff up." "Is that so?" Corbin said. "Then you wouldn't mind showing us your phone, would you? Just to clear things up. Show us your call history. Prove to us you never called her." Panic flashed in Travis's eyes, pure, unadulterated panic. "No, that's my private property. You can't just look at my phone. That's against the law." He started to back away from the door, fumbling to pull the phone from his pocket. For a second, Corbin thought he was going to smash it on the floor. That was all Corbin needed to see. The guilt was radiating off him in waves. "Miller," he said, not taking his eyes off Travis. "Get the warrant. Get it now. And get a team in there to search the house, top to bottom." While they waited for the judge to sign the emergency warrant, they kept Travis contained on his front porch. He paced back and forth, sweating profusely, muttering about his rights. He was a cornered animal, and he knew it. The moment the warrant came through, the team moved in. Corbin went straight for Travis, taking the phone from his hand before he could do anything with it. He opened the call log, and there it was, November 2nd. An outgoing call to the number belonging to Jolene Dubois. "You're a liar, Travis," Corbin said, holding up the phone. Travis stared at the screen, his face ashen. The fight went out of him. He sagged against the wall, his whole body trembling. Meanwhile, the search team was making its way through the house. It was just as neat and tidy as the outside, almost too neat. Like Caleb Vance's kitchen, it felt like a curated space designed to hide something. The first floor was clean, but then one of the deputies called out from the staircase leading to the second floor. "Detective, you're gonna want to see this." Corbin went over. The deputy was shining a UV light on the wall next to the stairs. On the light switch plate, almost invisible in normal light, was a single, perfect, bloody fingerprint. "And look at this!" the deputy said, moving the light along the wall. Faint smears and droplets, invisible to the naked eye, glowed a ghostly white under the UV light. They led from the top of the stairs through the dining room and into the east hall. Someone had tried to wash the wall, but they hadn't been thorough enough. Blood, he knew, is a stubborn witness. They took Travis Cole into custody. The samples from his house were rushed to the lab. The fingerprint on the light switch, the blood smears on the wall. Anya called him a few hours later. "It's a match, Miles," she said, her voice grim. "The fingerprint is Jolene's. The blood is Jolene's. All of it. You found your crime scene." Faced with the irrefutable, overwhelming physical evidence, Travis Cole confessed. The whole sordid, tragic story came spilling out in the cold, sterile environment of the interrogation room. On the evening of November 2nd, after getting her number from Caleb, he had called Jolene. He'd been lonely, he wanted company, they'd agreed on a price. She came to his house. Everything went as planned at first. They went upstairs to his bedroom. He paid her the agreed-upon amount, but afterwards he wanted more. He told her she should give him another session for free. He started to insult her. He told her the first service was too fast. He called her old and fat. He said she wasn't worth the money he'd already paid her. Jolene, true to the character described in her old police file, did not back down. She told him no. She told him she was a professional, that she earned her living through honest work, and if he wanted more of her time, he had to pay for it. His pride was wounded. His pathetic, fragile ego couldn't handle the rejection. He exploded. He grabbed her, refusing to let her leave. He told her he was taking his money back. She fought back, scratching at him, trying to get away. She slapped him across the face. That's when he snapped. In a fit of pure rage, he grabbed the small fruit knife he kept on his bedside table. He slashed at her face again and again, the same way Anya had described. The post-mortem disfigurement wasn't post-mortem at all. He had done it while she was alive, screaming. He punched her, kicked her, a brutal, merciless assault until she collapsed onto the floor, unconscious but still breathing. He stood over her, breathing heavily, the rage still consuming him. He knew he couldn't let her leave. He couldn't let her tell anyone what he had done. So, with a cold, terrifying clarity, he decided to finish it. He knelt down and stabbed her, multiple times, in the chest, until she was still. The house was silent then, except for his own ragged breathing. The rage subsided, replaced by a cold, icy panic. He had to get rid of her. He waited until the early hours of the morning, around 2 a.m. on November 3rd. He bound her hands and feet with zip ties he had in his garage. He wrapped her body in an old tarp. He loaded her onto a 3-wheeled utility cart he kept in his shed. The same kind of cart Caleb Vance's brother had been pushing in the yard, a detail that now made perfect, chilling sense. He pushed the cart through the dark, silent streets of his neighborhood, a grim parody of a man doing yard work. He went down to the river, to a secluded spot he knew. He rolled her body out of the tarp and pushed her into the dark, swirling water. He threw her bag, her phone, and her few belongings in after her. He watched as the current took her, pulling her down, carrying her away. Then he went home. He scrubbed the floors. He washed the walls. He cleaned every single spot of blood he could find. The next day he took the fruit knife, the murder weapon, and he threw it into a nearby stream, burying it under a pile of rocks. He thought he had committed the perfect crime. He thought the river would keep his secret forever. He was wrong. Following Travis Cole's confession, a dive team went to the stream he had described. After an hour of searching the muddy bottom, they found it. A small, cheap fruit knife with a black plastic handle. It was the final piece of evidence. On May 21st, 2020, after a short trial, the Chongqing City People's Court, or as it was known in Havenwood, the Zhongjin Parish Court, found Travis Cole guilty of intentional murder. He was sentenced to death, a sentence later suspended and commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was also ordered to pay 20,000 yuan, a paltry sum of a few $1,000s, in compensation to Jolene's family. A family that had barely noticed she was gone. The case was closed. The paperwork was filed, but for Detective Miles Corbin, it wasn't over. He stood by the riverbank at the same spot where Old Man Bo had first seen her. The Mississippi flowed on, brown and powerful and indifferent. It had given up one of its secrets, but he knew it held 1,000 more. The town of Havenwood would forget. The story of Jolene Dubois would fade, becoming just another piece of grim local folklore whispered in dive bars. But Corbin wouldn't forget. He would remember the bound hands, the ruined face, and the terrible, lonely silence of a woman no one had bothered to look for. The humidity felt heavier than ever, thick with the weight of it all. The darkness hadn't been defeated. It had just been given a name. The victory tasted like ash in his mouth. Corbin sat in the corner of the same dive bar where Earl had first given him Brenda's name. The air was thick with the ghosts of 1,000 bad decisions. The whiskey in his glass was cheap, but it was cold. It was the only thing that felt real. The Travis Cole case was a win. A monster was off the streets. A name had been given to the rage that had torn Jolene Dubois apart. The sheriff had clapped him on the back. The DA had called him a credit to the department, but none of it felt like a victory. He'd won, but Jolene was still dead. Her mother, lost in a fog of age and silence, would probably never even understand what had happened to her daughter. Her brother Jesse had collected the paltry compensation money from the court and disappeared, likely to drink it away in some other town's forgotten corner. Brenda had moved out of her apartment, terrified of the ghosts she now saw in every shadow, and Caleb Vance, the sniveling coward who had set the whole nightmare in motion, had been given a slap on the wrist for his involvement in the illegal fishing ring and was now a free man, probably already whispering his poison into some other lonely woman's ear. Justice, Corbin thought, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. It wasn't a cleansing fire, it was just paperwork. A file stamped closed and shoved into a cabinet to gather dust. The darkness didn't get locked away in a cell with Travis Cole. It was still out there. It was in the humidity. It was in the muddy water of the river. It was in the quiet, desperate lives of people like Jolene and Caleb and Jesse. He had just put a name and a face to one of its many expressions, and the effort had hollowed him out. He was on his third whiskey when his phone vibrated against the sticky surface of the table. The screen lit up with the sheriff's number. Corbin sighed. He knew that call. It wasn't a good job call. It was a get back to work call. The darkness didn't take a night off. "Corbin," he answered, his voice rough. "Miles, sorry to bother you off hours." Sheriff Boudreau's voice was tight, strained. "But you need to get over to the old Beaumont place out on River Road, now." The Beaumont place. Corbin's gut tightened for a different reason. That wasn't some shack in Baisha or a rundown house in Stone Creek. The Beaumont estate was old money, sugarcane money, now chemical plant money. It was a sprawling, white-pillared mansion that looked like it had been ripped from the pages of a history book, a monument to a time when the parish had a different kind of power. It was the absolute opposite of Jolene Dubois's world. "What's going on, Sheriff?" "It's Thomas Beaumont, Jr., the sheriff said, his voice low. "His son, the family's lawyer, called us. The kid missed a board meeting this morning. Unheard of. They sent the groundskeeper to check on him. The groundskeeper found him." A pause. "It's not good, Miles. It's strange. Get here." The line went dead. Corbin drained his glass. The burn of the whiskey, a familiar, unwelcome friend. He threw a 20 on the table and walked out into the thick, wet night. The air hadn't changed. It was still heavy with secrets. A new set of secrets. The drive out to River Road was a journey into another world. The shabby storefronts and cracked sidewalks of Havenwood gave way to manicured lawns and ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. The houses grew larger, set further back from the road, hidden behind iron gates and brick walls. This was where the people who ran the parish lived, the people who didn't end up on Anya Sharma's steel table, until now. The Beaumont estate was lit up like a movie set. A dozen patrol cars and unmarked vehicles were parked on the long, circular driveway. The flashing blue and red lights painted the white columns of the mansion in garish, frantic strokes. The sheriff was waiting for him on the grand porch, looking older and more tired than Corbin had ever seen him. "Thank God you're here," Boudreau said, running a hand over his balding head. "This is a mess." "What have we got?" Corbin asked, pulling on his gloves. "Thomas Beaumont Jr., 35 years old, heir to the Beaumont chemical fortune, found in his study. That's the simple part." The sheriff shook his head. "The rest of it, you just have to see it." He led Corbin through the massive front doors into a cavernous foyer. The house was immaculate. Marble floors shone under a crystal chandelier. The air was cool and smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. It was silent. Not a quiet, peaceful silence. It was a dead, heavy silence. The kind of silence that presses in on you. The groundskeeper let himself in when Tommy didn't answer, Boudreau explained in a hushed voice. Found the front door unlocked. Said the house was like this, quiet as a tomb. They walked down a long hall lined with ancestral portraits, their painted eyes seeming to follow their every move. The study was at the end of the hall. 2 deputies stood guard outside the open double doors. They looked pale. Corbin stepped inside, and the strangeness the sheriff had spoken of hit him immediately. The room was perfect, a cliché of old wealth, mahogany walls, leather-bound books from floor to ceiling, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and in the center of the room, behind a massive ornate desk, sat Thomas Beaumont, Jr. He was dressed in an expensive silk pajama set. He was slumped in his high-backed leather chair, his head lolling to one side. His eyes were wide open, staring at something on the far wall. His mouth was open in a silent scream. His face was a mask of pure, abject terror, but there wasn't a mark on him. No blood, no sign of a struggle. The room was pristine. Not a single book was out of place. Not a single piece of paper was disturbed on the desk. It looked as if he had simply been sitting there reading and had died of fright. Corbin walked slowly around the desk. His gaze swept the room, and then he saw it. The first crack in the perfect facade. On the mantelpiece above the fireplace was a beautiful antique carriage clock. Its hands were stopped. He glanced at his own watch. Then he looked at the grandfather clock standing in the corner of the room. Its long pendulum was still. He looked at the small, elegant clock on the desk. It was dead too. "Sheriff," Corbin said, his voice low, "check the other rooms. Check every clock in this house." Boudreaux gave him a confused look but nodded and relayed the order to a deputy. Corbin knelt down beside the victim. The terror on Thomas Beaumont's face was chilling. It wasn't the look of a man having a heart attack. It was the look of a man who had seen the face of God or the devil and hadn't survived the encounter. Anya Sharma arrived, her usual brisk efficiency seeming to push back against the room's oppressive stillness. She began her preliminary examination, her movements quick and precise. Corbin continued his slow circuit of the room, his senses on high alert. He was looking for the thing that didn't belong, the one note that was out of key in this silent, terrifying symphony. The deputy came back, his face white. "Sheriff, Detective, you were right. We've checked every room, the kitchen, the bedrooms, even the bathrooms. Every clock, every single one of them is stopped, and they're all stopped at the same time." "What time is that?" Corbin asked, already knowing the answer. 3:33, the deputy said, his voice trembling slightly. 3:33 in the morning. Corbin looked at the frozen face of the dead man. He looked at the stopped clocks. This wasn't a murder. Not in the way Travis Cole's crime had been a murder. That was a crime of brutal human rage. This was something else. This was a performance, a ritual, a statement written in silence and fear. "Anya," he said, turning to the pathologist, "any preliminary cause of death?" Anya looked up from her work, her brow furrowed in concentration. She shone her penlight into Beaumont's wide, terrified eyes. "No obvious trauma, no signs of violence, no petechial hemorrhaging to suggest asphyxiation. His skin color is odd, a deep pallor, but no signs of cyanosis." She shook her head. "I've never seen anything like it, Miles. Right now on paper it looks like he just stopped, like his heart just gave up. But a healthy 35-year-old man doesn't just die of fright." "This one did," Corbin said, his gaze fixed on the victim's face. He walked over to the desk. It was, as he'd noted, perfectly tidy. A leather blotter, a silver pen set, a single closed book. It was a collection of Edgar Allan Poe stories bound in red leather. Corbin picked it up carefully with a gloved hand. He opened it. It fell open to a specific page, as if it had been left there for a long time. The page was bookmarked with a thin black ribbon. The story was The Telltale Heart. Corbin read the first line. "True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am, but why will you say that I am mad?" He felt a cold dread wash over him that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This wasn't just a killer. This was an artist, a storyteller, and he was just getting started. He closed the book and noticed something tucked into the spine, almost completely hidden. It was a single, small, black feather, a raven's feather. He held it up to the light. It was perfect, unbroken, placed there with deliberate care, a signature. The Jolene Dubois case had been a descent into a world of grubby, desperate violence. It was ugly and sad and brutally human. But this was a door opening into a different kind of darkness, a darkness that was patient, intelligent, and utterly, terrifyingly insane. The silence of the house seemed to deepen, and Corbin had the distinct feeling that he wasn't just investigating a crime, he was stepping onto a stage, and the playwright was watching him from the wings.